Okay. Yeah, you can bring the students in if you want to. Well, yeah, I keep looking at that damn clock. It's 8 minutes till, so. Yeah, go ahead and have them come on in and then family as well. Yeah. All right, so, and I'm sorry. Oh, great, thank you.
And then, which one's yours?
Okay, that'll be the original. Right?
I just put this on.
Yeah, that's right. That way it's easier for them to.
And here's that final. But I put those notes by the ones I.
Oh, fine, that's great. That's fine. That's fine. So. I forgot where stuff is. Looks different. I gotta figure out where I put that.
You want to say that we're gonna use it?
Yeah, I do. Now where did I put that? Spring. Yeah. Yeah, it's well, if you go, well, it's on YouTube and it is Judge Neary's virtual courtroom. Yeah, and if they have trouble finding it, let me know. I don't know. I don't have necessarily a separate link, so. There's a little bit of a delay, obviously, as you can see. True. Sorry about this. Nor didn't that. Can't find the order I did the other day. I'll find it.
Yeah, sure.
She say the. She tells when the jury is.
Where they are?
I don't know if we have them here yet. or we have them. That's because that I hadn't heard yet, that's all. Yeah, I'll go grab, just give me a heads up, stick your head in, let me know, and I'll go put my robe on. So, just trying to get this one new thing done, I think it's done. So the other lights ready, once I get confirmation. Well, only you know. With Jack. Thank you. No, I think maybe not now, Miss. She came in here. Oh. Unless Miracle missing one out. Yeah. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. We'll let you know when it's time, but as soon as we got confirmation that the jury is all here, then we'll rise and have them brought in and we'll stay standing until they are seated and then we'll be seated. So I'll tell you all this stuff as it goes. Off the bench. Ready? Okay, bring them in. And I'll have you go ahead and rise. We sure, does that need to be tapped, put on the microphone? Because mine doesn't have.
Thank you, James.
Or remind. Not in the band.
Oh, I am sorry. I was gonna go.
Come on in and find a seat, and you can go ahead and take your seat if you'd like, because we're standing out in respect for you. Everyone may be seated then. Folks, I'm going to trust that if you think you might have any issues about hearing, that you'll switch, maybe come closer. But if you don't have any concern about that, there's nothing that I need to worry about. I would just ask then that you'll stay in your same seat so I can sort of quickly eyeball that everybody's here and they're in the right place. So, okay. So I've given you a set of preliminary jury instructions, and I'm going to first read those to you before we proceed further. It's tradition, as well as based in historical context, why we read them to you. People retain information different ways, and I'm going to read them to you, and you can follow along or not at your choice, but you have your own copy to keep and retain throughout the trial. But ultimately, the reason I read them to them is historically, jurors didn't get an actual hard copy of the instructions. They were just told what the law was and then sent to deliberate. It's been many years since we've done that. But essentially, we give you the instructions because they can sometimes get complicated. We want you to be able to refer to them if you want to. Just so you know, I didn't want you to be offended by the fact that I'm reading them to you. I just wanted to explain that that's what we normally do. And we'll have preliminaries, and we will ultimately have final instructions. And they are to be considered as the instructions of this case. So it's like part 1 of 2 and part 2 of 2. I know that makes sense, but I want to explain that as well. So just follow along or listen as you like, and I will read to you the preliminary instructions. Preliminary instruction number 1, members of the jury, before the lawyers make their opening statements, the court gives you these preliminary instructions to help you better understand what will be presented to you and how you should conduct yourself during the trial. You are to consider these instructions together with any instructions given to you during the trial and with the instructions given at the end of the case, and apply them as a whole to the facts of the case. In considering the instructions, you will attach no importance or significance whatever to the order in which they are given. Number 2, this is a criminal case where the plaintiff is the state of Iowa and the defendant is Nathaniel John Parker III. The trial will proceed in the following manner or order. After I conclude these preliminary instructions, the attorney for the state of Iowa will read the trial information and the defendant's plea of not guilty. Next, the state's lawyer may make an opening statement. Next, the lawyer for the defendant may make an opening statement or reserve making an opening statement until the conclusion of the state's case. An opening statement is not evidence, but is simply a summary of what the lawyers expect the evidence to be. The state will then present evidence by calling witnesses and offering exhibits, and counsel for the defendant may cross-examine any witnesses called by the state. Following the state's case, the defendant may present evidence by calling witnesses and offering exhibits, and state's counsel may cross-examine any witnesses called by the defendant. Following the defendant's case, the state may present further evidence called rebuttal evidence to challenge the defendant's evidence. After all the evidence has been received, I will further instruct you on the law that you are to apply in reaching your verdict. After presentation of the evidence is completed and I have further instructed you on the law, the lawyers will make their closing arguments to summarize and to interpret the evidence for you. As with opening statements, closing arguments are not evidence. You will then retire to deliberate on your verdict. Number 3, the trial information is the document used to formally charge the defendant with the crime and is merely a method by which the defendant is brought into court for trial. It is not evidence. The trial information in this case charges the defendant with murder in the first degree. The defendant has entered a plea of not guilty to this charge. In addition, the defendant has asserted the defense of self-defense. The plea of not guilty is a complete denial of the charge and places the burden on the state to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Whenever I instruct you, the state must prove something. It must be by evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. If the state does not prove the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, your verdict must be not guilty. The defendant is presumed innocent and not guilty. This presumption of innocence requires you to put aside all suspicion, which might arise from the arrest, charge, or the present situation of the defendant. The presumption of innocence remains with the defendant throughout the trial unless the evidence establishes guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Number 4, the burden is on the state to prove the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. A reasonable doubt is one that fairly and naturally arises from the evidence or a lack of evidence produced by the state. If after a full and fair consideration of all the evidence, you are firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt, then you have no reasonable doubt and you should find the defendant guilty. But if after a full and fair consideration of all the evidence in the case, or from the lack or failure of evidence produced by the state, you are not firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt, then you have a reasonable doubt and you should find the defendant not guilty. If there is a reasonable doubt as to the degree of the crime, the defendant shall only be convicted of the degree for which there is no reasonable doubt. Number 5, my duty is to tell you what the law is. Your duty is to accept and apply this law. It will be your duty to decide from the evidence what the facts are. You and you alone are the judges of the facts. In considering the evidence, make deductions and reach conclusions by using reason, common sense, and your observations and your experience. You will hear the evidence, decide what the facts are, and then apply those facts to the law, which I will give you in these preliminary instructions, and in the final instructions at the conclusion of the case. You will then deliberate and reach your verdict. You are the sole judges of the facts, but you must follow the law as stated in my instructions, whether you agree with it or not. You've been chosen and sworn as jurors to try the issues of fact presented by the parties. You are to perform this duty without bias or prejudice as to any party and without regard to any personal likes or dislikes, sympathy or emotions. Our system of law does not permit jurors to be governed by sympathy, prejudice, or public opinion. No language used by the court in these instructions and no statements, conducts, remarks, or rulings of the court during the progress of the trial should be considered by you as an indication that the court has any opinion as to the facts of the case or what your verdict should be. Number 6, you shall base your verdict only upon the evidence in these instructions, which I give you now, during trial, and at the end of the trial. Evidence is 1, testimony in person or testimony previously given. 2, exhibits received by the court. 3, stipulations, which are agreements between parties. 4, any other matter admitted into evidence. Facts may be proved by direct evidence, circumstantial evidence, or both. Direct evidence is evidence from a witness who claims actual knowledge of a fact, such as an eyewitness. Circumstantial evidence is evidence about a chain of facts which show a defendant guilty or not guilty. The law makes no distinction between direct evidence and circumstantial evidence. Give all the evidence the weight and value you think it is entitled to receive. The following are not evidence. 1, statements, arguments, questions, and comments by the lawyers. 2, objections and rulings on the objections. 3, testimony I tell you to disregard. 4, anything you see or hear about this case outside the courtroom. 5, documents or items read from or referred to, which were not offered and received into evidence. Number 7, decide the facts from the evidence. Consider the evidence using your observation, common sense, and experience. Try to reconcile any conflicts in the evidence, but if you cannot, accept the evidence you find more believable. In determining the facts, you may have to decide what testimony you believe. You may believe all, part, or none of any witness's testimony. There are many factors which you may consider in deciding what testimony to believe. For example, 1, whether the testimony is reasonable and consistent with other evidence you believe. 2, whether a witness has made inconsistent statements. 3, the witness's appearance, conduct, age, intelligence, memory, and knowledge of the facts. 4, the witness's interest in the trial, their motive, candor, bias, and prejudice. Number 8, from time to time during the trial, I may be called upon to make rulings of law on objections or motions made by the lawyers. It is the duty of the lawyer for each party to object when another party offers testimony or other evidence which the lawyer believes is not properly admissible. You should not show prejudice against the lawyer or the party they represent because the lawyer has made an objection. You should not infer or conclude from any ruling or other comment I may make that I have any opinions on the merits of the case, favoring one side or the other. And if I sustain an objection to a question that goes unanswered by the witness, you should not draw any inferences or conclusions from the question itself. Number 9, during the trial, it may be necessary for me to talk with the lawyers out of your hearing, either by having a bench conference here while you are present in the courtroom or by calling a recess. Please understand that while you are waiting and we are working, the purpose of those conferences is to decide how certain evidence is to be treated under the rules of evidence and to avoid confusion and error. We will, of course, do what we can to keep the number and length of these conferences to a minimum. Number 10, if you want to take notes during the course of the trial, you may do so. However, it is difficult to take notes, detailed notes that is, and pay attention to what the witnesses are saying at the time. If you do take notes, be sure that your taking of the notes does not interfere with your listening to and considering all the evidence. Also, if you take notes, do not discuss them with anyone before you begin your deliberations. Do not take the notes with you at the end of the day. Be sure to leave them on your chair in the courtroom. Our court attendant will safeguard the notes at the end of each day and ensure that they remain confidential. No one will read them. The notes will remain confidential throughout the trial and will be destroyed at the conclusion of the trial. If you choose not to take notes, remember it is your own individual responsibility to listen carefully to the evidence. You cannot give this responsibility to someone who is taking notes. We depend on the judgment of all members of the jury. You must all remember the evidence in this case. And whether or not you take notes, you should rely on your own memory regarding what was said. Your notes, of course, are not evidence. A juror's notes are not necessarily more reliable than the memory of another juror who chooses to carefully consider the evidence without taking notes. You should not be overly influenced by the notes. We will have an official court reporter making a record of the trial. However, we will not have typewritten transcripts of the record available for your use in reaching your decision in this case. And finally, instruction number 11. You may not communicate about this case before reaching your verdict. This includes by cell phone, electronic media such as text message, Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, email, etc. Do not do any research or make any investigation about this case on your own. Do not visit or view any place discussed in this case. And do not use internet maps or Google Earth or any other program or device to search for or to view any place discussed in the testimony. Also, do not research any information about this case, the law, or the people involved, including the parties, the witnesses, the lawyers, or the judge. This includes using the internet to research events or people referenced in the trial. This case will be tried on evidence presented in this courtroom. If you conduct independent research, you will be relying on matters not presented in court. The parties have a right to have this matter decided on the evidence they know about and that has been introduced here in court. If you do some research or investigation or experiment that we don't know about, then your verdict may be influenced by inaccurate, incomplete, or misleading information that has not been tested by the trial process, which includes taking the oath, to tell the truth, and by cross-examination. All of the parties are entitled to a fair trial rendered by an impartial jury, and you must conduct yourself so as to maintain the integrity of the trial process. If you decide a case based upon information that was not presented in court, you will have denied the parties a fair trial in accordance with the rules of this state, and you will have done an injustice. So it is very important that you abide by these rules. All right, so the next manner of business is, Mr. Loomis, would you read the trial information and state the defendant's plea to the charge?
Yes, Your Honor. The Iowa District Court for Woodbury County, the state of Iowa, Clayton versus Nathaniel John Pepper, defendant. Comes now James E. Loomis, Woodbury County Attorney, and in the name and by the authority of the state of Iowa, accuses Nathaniel John Parker III of the crime of count 1, murder in the first degree, committed as follows. Count 1. Said defendant, on or about the 24th day of February 2023 in Woodbury County, Iowa, with malice aforethought, willfully, deliberately, and with premeditation, killed another person, all in violation of Iowa Code Section 707.2, subsection 1, subsection A. True information signed by James D. Loomis. To this charge, the defendant pleads not guilty.
All right, so the next manner of business is for the state to make their opening statement. I just want to bring to your attention, if you tend to at all to watch the screen, there's a tiny bit of a delay, so you probably should ignore that. Because I'm not sure what the length of the delay is, but that's the way it seems to be operating today. So, Mr. Loomis, is the state ready to give your opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may do so at this time. Do you need any video or Elmo or anything like that?
No, I do not.
Okay, fine. Just tell me when you do for both counts.
Thank you, Your Honor. Lower, Mulder, Parker. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury. William Harlan was stabbed to death on the night of February 24th, 2023. A cold February night that William Harlan was not expecting. He got into the car of a friend, carload of people that he got in. And he got in to get warmed up on that cold night. And on that particular night, instead of getting warmed up, he was killed. And what you will see and what you will hear during the course of this trial is that the person that stabbed William Harlan to death on that night was the defendant, Daniel Parker III. The evidence will point and show that on that particular night, William Harlan had walked to the Select Mart on 14th and Jackson. He got to the Select Mart that particular night around 8:39. I say 8:39 because the video surveillance that you'll see during the course of this trial shows him walking out. And he's milling around the front of the Select Mart that particular night. And while he's out in front of the Select Mart, he doesn't go inside. He's just standing outside the door. And he doesn't go inside initially until a car pulls up. This car is a white Nissan Murano. There are 4 people in this particular car. The driver of this particular vehicle is Conway Malone. The front seat passenger of this particular vehicle is the defendant's dad. Now it gets a little confusing because both the defendant and the defendant's dad have the same name, Nathaniel Parker. Nathaniel Parker dad is Nathaniel Parker Jr. He's in the front seat. In the back is the defendant, He's seated in the rear driver's seat. In the rear passenger seat is Jeffrey Lee. Now, this group of 4 people came from Nathaniel Parker Jr.'s apartment, or the defendant's dad, that particular night. And what you'll hear during the testimony is that Jeffrey Lee knew the defendant's dad, and Jeffrey Lee knew the defendant through his dad. Jeffrey Lee was at his apartment because that's where he was that day. And at that time, Jeffrey Lee was in a relationship with the defendant's dad's sister, Natalie Parker. And that particular day, they were just in their apartment on 9th Street. And sometime that afternoon, the defendant and the defendant's dad were over at the apartment for a period of time. And while we were there, the defendant was showing Jeffrey some knives that he had on his person. And he actually gave Jeffrey one of those knives while he was there. The gold knife, gold handled knife holder. But he also showed Jeffrey on that particular afternoon another knife, a bayonet style knife of this long. And that knife is important because it will come up later in the course of the evidence that you will see and hear during the course of this trial. But he shows Jeffrey this particular knife, gives him one of the knives, takes the bayonet style knife with him, and he and the defendant and the defendant's dad leave. They end up going back to the defendant's dad's apartment, 414 11th Street, apartment number 6. Later that particular day, as things progress throughout the afternoon, Jeffrey stays in his apartment with Natalie. He'd been drinking that particular day. He'll talk to you and tell you about what he had to drink on that particular day. And he went over to the defendant's apartment, or the defendant's dad's apartment that particular day. He's going to say it was somewhere between 9 and 10 o'clock. It was dark outside and we went there that particular night. And when he gets to the apartment, there's a few people there. The defendant's dad, Daniel Parker Jr., and another native male that he doesn't know. And the 3 of them are there, and he shows up. They're drinking and talking. And shortly thereafter, this native male that he doesn't know his name, he eventually leaves. And the 3 of them decide that they're going to go to the select mart to get some more alcohol. But they don't have a ride. And so Conway Malone comes over, drives over in this white Nissan. And so all 4 of them pile into the car. And they go from the defendant's dad's apartment to the select mart. Conway parks in front of a gas pump. Jeffrey goes inside and prepays for a few dollars worth of gas. When they pull up, it's 9:12 p.m. when they pull up to the select. And William is still outside the select mart at that time. Still outside the front. And there's an exchange that happens between William and the defendant's dad. These 2 people know each other. They appear to be friendly. And William ends up going into the select market. And he ends up buying 2 beers at the select market. When he comes out, he gets into that Nissan Murano. He got in because it was a cold night. They asked him to get in, go back to the defendant's dad's apartment to warm up, probably sober up. Now, when the 5 of them get into the car, what you'll see from the video surveillance is William Harlan wasn't stabbed before he got into that car. He had been milling around the front, not going inside. When he went into the select mark that particular night and bought those 2 beers, you could see him clearly in that video surveillance. He's walking fine. He's not been stabbed. There's no evidence that he's been stabbed. And so when he gets into that car, there are now 5 people in that vehicle. Everyone's seated in the same position they were when they left. Conway's driving. The defendant's dad is a front seat passenger. The defendant is the rear driver passenger. Jeffrey is the rear passenger driver, passenger. And William Harlan sits in the middle. They leave the select mark and they leave to a drug house because Jeffrey wants to go score cement. And so they leave the select mart and go north about 1.5 blocks to on Jones. And William had no problem getting into the car. No problem sliding over into that middle back passenger seat. There's some small conversation, but mostly just reading when he gets into the car. Not a lot of conversation takes place when they go to his house. Jeffrey gets out of the house, goes into the back door, goes in to buy some meth. He's in there for a few minutes. And at some point, the defendant's dad comes in and asks him, "What's taking so long?" Jeffrey tells him, "I'm just coming out now." And so he comes out and he gets into the car, same seat that he was in. The defendant's dad gets back in the front passenger seat, same seat that he had been in. There's something different when he gets into that car. William's no longer alert. Instead, his head had dropped back, and he was not responsive. Jeffrey will testify that he thought that William had passed out. But what the evidence will show is that he had not passed out. He'd been stabbed. He'd been stabbed multiple times in the left side of his chest. And they all pile into the car and they drive back to the defendant's dad's apartment on 11th Street. Takes them a few minutes to get from one place to the next. They pull into the back alleyway of that apartment, and Jeffrey gets out. The other passengers are starting to get out. And Jeffrey's trying to wake up William. Come on. Wake up. Unresponsive. Not getting out. The defendant, he gets out of the vehicle. He comes around and pushes Jeffrey to the side. Jeffrey can tell that he's angry. And the defendant picks William up out of the car and walks him a few feet from where the car is, throws him onto the ground like a pile of garbage. How do I know that? How will you know that? Because you'll see it on the video surveillance. Throws him onto the ground like a pile of garbage, walks away. Jeffrey will testify that he was upset by what he just saw and got in the defendant's face about it. Asked him what he was doing that. What are you doing that for? The two of them eventually pick up William from the ground. The defendant is carrying him by the shoulders. Jeffrey is carrying him by the feet. The defendant's dad is ahead of them, walking around the alley to the front of the apartment and going to the front door. The defendant's dad unlocks the door and they carry him in, carry him down the stairs to where the defendant's dad's apartment is. Now that bayonet knife that I talked with about earlier that had been shown to Jeffrey that same day, you'll see that knife again. It's in the defendant's coat pocket. You can see it for multiple shots of that video surveillance when they're outside. You can see the shimmer of the blade. You can see it as they're walking into the apartment through the door. You can see it clearly when they're walking down the hallway and they're turning to go into the defendant's dad's apartment. William's not responsive to any of this. He's been stabbed multiple times. He's bleeding out. Lung had been punctured and his aorta had been severed. They open the door and they lay William essentially right in the front door when you walk in to this apartment. It's a small apartment. It's about 9:35 when they pull into that back out. They had left the select mart at 9:19. A few minutes after they pulled into that back alleyway, they carried him inside. The 9:47 was called the 911. The police respond to the apartment, paramedics respond to the apartment. Now, this is a small apartment, is what we described to you. There's a small kitchen and a small bathroom, and one basically big room to this apartment. That's not very big. The police show up. It's a secure door. They have to wait momentarily for someone to come let them in. The defendant's dad is the one that comes to the front door and lets them in. They go in, they go down. They go to the door of the apartment and they see William on his back, unresponsive, not looking good. Jeffrey's not real cooperative with the police when they get there and they have to grab him and pull him out. The defendant's dad's there, they pull him out and set him in the hallway. There's one person left in that apartment. The police don't initially know about it because he doesn't make any effort to announce that he's in there. Why? Because he's hiding in the bathroom. He's hiding in the bathroom because what the evidence will show is that he was hiding a knife in that bathroom. The police get everyone pulled out. Paramedics come in. They can't come in until the scene is secured by the police. They come in. They immediately begin treatment. They do everything that they can with really not to. William Harlan was pronounced dead at the hospital shortly after he arrived there on February 24th. Police secured the scene. They execute a search warrant on that residence. And Officer Tyler Hemmingson is one of the officers that's helping to execute the search warrant in that particular house. He'll testify that he went into the bathroom, that was his area to execute the search warrant in. And when you go in, the first thing that you do is kind of begin your search on ground level. But his experience taught him is that you don't end the search at ground level. You look up. And you look up in this tiny bathroom, what he saw was a tile in that bathroom that was ajar. And so he went up, removed that tile, looked underneath, and saw a red t-shirt. He pulled it out. This red t-shirt was wrapping up a bayonet style knife and appeared to have blood on it. It did have blood on it. And it was wrapped in a t-shirt. And that t-shirt had blood on it. And what you'll hear during the course of trial and testimony from folks from the criminalistics laboratory and Anthony and I, where they tested those items. There was blood on the blade of that knife. They can't tell you whose blood it is, but there was blood on it. There was blood on that red t-shirt that knife was wrapped in. And that blood was William Hartman. William Harlan was bleeding out that night. He was thrown on the ground out in the alleyway. He was bleeding out when he was carried into the apartment, laid down on that floor of the apartment. But that blood was soaking into his clothes. And you'll see that. You'll see his coat, his t-shirt, and his undershirt soaked with his blood. And what the evidence will show is that the defendant had been hiding in the bathroom. That knife that they pulled out of the ceiling tile was cold and it was wet. That t-shirt was wet. But they were still missing one person. There were 5 in that home. They knew of 4. So as you can imagine, an investigation is begun. And one of the first things that the officers look at is they're looking for video surveillance to help identify what happened, help identify the people involved. The video surveillance helped them identify the vehicle, this white Nissan Murano. They located that Nissan Murano that night. The driver of it was Conway Malone. And in that Nissan Murano, they found a different knife. And during the execution of that search warrant, they found other knives. But what I believe the evidence will tell you and show you is that those knives were not involved in the death of William Harlan. There was one knife involved, and that was the knife that punctured his lung, severed his aorta. The pathologist who conducted the autopsy will testify that that stab wound that punctured his lung and cut his aorta was about 13 centimeters long. The other knives that were found as part of this investigation don't have anything on them that would suggest that they were involved. Or practically speaking, would indicate that they were involved in any way. There's no evident blood on them. The facts and circumstances of what happened on February 24th of 2023 will show that this is the defendant is the one that stabbed and killed William Harlan. Nobody else. And at the close of evidence, when everything's wrapped up, after you've heard all the witnesses, after you've seen all the video surveillance, after you've seen the photographs and the exhibits that display the testing that was done on certain items that were part of this investigation, that the defendant stabbed William Harmon. And the state will be asking that you find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Loomis. Mr. Loest, do you wish to give an opening at this time or defer?
I would wish to give an opening at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, when you're ready, you may begin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please support Mr. Loomis, ladies and gentlemen. and jurors. Heard what the state believes in this case, which may coincide and may explain the questions that the state asked me about during your diary, about can you see beyond? Can you see something even though it's black? And you make an assumption? Because that's what they have. And so they need that. Well, Mr. Parker didn't do something. What we're going to show you is why the state can't prove it. And that's an important distinction. And now I know that you're going to be asking for your common sense, but I think the situation that we just described is probably not going to match up with your life experiences and other things that you dealt with in the past. You probably haven't gone riding around people, drugs, picking up homeless people, having somebody who did that wrong. Well, I'm asking is what it's not in Pittsburgh. Not just because Parker got it, because everybody got it. They're in a different world. Living in a world, and you hear about where people are buying drugs. Living on the street are danger. They're different. So the fact that they're just a knife sitting in the center console of a vehicle might be shocking to some of you. It will not be in this situation. So just you need to understand that we're going to be talking about this. And one night that is a part of this area. Right, is right there. Picking right up. Not trying to hide it. Not concealing it. They never told me. Just go. That night, if this is the night, refused to stab Mr. Harlan, went into his coat pocket, and then got washed off. There's no blood. There's no blood in his pocket. There's no blood on the right side of Mr. Parker's coat. No, except the bone. Now on the left side, where he's carrying Mr. Harlan, where the wounds were, there's blood there. Makes sense. Blood on his hand. The evidence will show he was washing off blood from a head. Because he carried. Now, Mr. Loomis didn't talk too much about what the evidence will show as far as Mr. Harlan. Mr. Harlan drugs and alcohol. He gets into this. And. It's perfect. Doesn't really. Kind of who he is. They're taking him in to keep him from freezing. And suddenly he decides. Stab his man. Don't even know. Friend my dad. The evidence isn't going to show. Now, maybe you have experience with people. Who's control? There's going to be a reason why Mr. Parker took a couple steps and threw Mr. Harvey into the snow. Not only ground, into the snow. Also explained why he took off the shirt. He didn't want that. What you can't see behind the car. So that. I think what happened. They have to prove. Mr. Parker. Stabbed. Mr. Harvey. The doctor. He's going to tell you that the wound has a flat side to it and a sharp side. Now, the knife, Mr. Parker was carrying. Bayonet, laid it on both sides. Now, doctor also checked it. Sure, that can't really tell. I can't say that's a knife. Say it. But you can't say it is. And Mr. Harvey's blood, not on that knife. Mr. Harvey's blood is not on Mr. Parker's coat, not in his pocket, not on his price. And the evidence function. Why would somebody do this? And it's clear from even what Mr. Lewis was explaining. This was a chance handling element. There was no problem. There was no issue. There was nothing. There would be no evidence. So, for this, as the state had inspired, Spark had been sitting next to a guy for a few minutes and decided that that was enough for him to kill him. And for no other reason, because there isn't one. And so, Mr. Parker can't tell you what happened. All he can tell you is it wasn't me. Now, certainly it's sad that that doesn't mean. And from the start of 9 until Rob's dead, at it's 10:50 there, let's just show 10:50 in the hospital. It was an hour after the police first showed up at 9 that he passed away. So they believe the evidence will show that he couldn't have been moving around. if he had been stabbed sometime earlier. There is a period of time where when he has a backpack outside the select line, he walks around to the back for a couple of minutes, comes back, he doesn't have a backpack. He never goes to retrieve it after he's picked up. Don't let it bust. Possible, somebody else robbed him and stabbed him. I don't know. Mr. Parker. All we know is that he was sitting in a car. And the evidence will prove that. And then Mr. Harding gets in that car. And that's it. The evidence will show he had a knife. But the evidence will also show there's no blood on his hands. And that's before he put the knife away, doing anything prior. And so. Doesn't make any sense. Don't know what happened behind that car. And that's not.
Council, Cheryl, can we, I want to join back here in chambers. All right. Everybody allow council to be done. Folks, just take a stand and stretch if you like, we'll be right back.
Your Honor, did you not?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead and be seated. Okay, folks, I made an error in these instructions and I wanted to rectify it as promptly as I could. And I wanted to explain to council what I was doing. The defendant has never provided notice nor indicated that he was going to rely on the claim of self-defense. That was entered in instruction number 3 by error. And so I essentially want that one sentence where it says the defendant has asserted defense of self-defense, that should be stricken through. That was clearly an error by the court. And that is consistent with what you heard in opening statements. I just don't want you to be left with a different impression. And I wanted to clarify it as quickly as I became aware of the error. In fact, I noticed it as I read it, and then I knew I needed to talk to the attorneys because it seemed inconsistent with what I understood the case was about. So please disregard that. This case is not about self-defense. And so the error was mine. Okay, is the state ready to present their first witness?
Yes, Your Honor, the state calls Jeffrey Lee. Why don't you sit here?
Lee, I'm just going to ask you to raise your right hand, please. You swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in this matter? Yes. Okay, fine. We'll make sure we adjust that microphone so we. And if for some reason, folks, you don't hear or can't hear him, just get my attention somehow and we'll adjust things as necessary. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Loomis, you may begin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Lee.
Good morning,
Can you state your name for the jury, please?
Jeffrey Lee.
Mr. Lee, where is it that you're living right now?
Well, I live in Omaha, Nebraska.
How long have you been living in Omaha, Nebraska?
About a month.
Have you lived in Sioux City before?
Yes,
Approximately when did you live in Sioux City most recently?
I left Sioux City in March,
March of what year, Mr. Lee?
2023.
So March of this year, you moved from Sioux City?
Yes.
How long had you been living in Sioux City before you moved in March of 2023?
Well, I've been in Sioux City since 2006, but I left Sioux City couple different times, but the most recent time was 2020.
So as I understand it, then Mr. Lee, you've lived at Sioux City at different parts of your life. Most recently, then you would have moved from Sioux City in 2023 or March of 2023. Do you remember where you were living when you lived in Sioux City most recently?
Well, I used to live at the on 1901 Pierce, but the building got burned down, and I started staying with a friend of mine's, Natalie Parker.
And when did you move in with Natalie Parker?
It was, I believe, maybe in January.
January of 2023?
Yes.
And what was your relationship with Natalie Parker?
Well, I wanted her to be my girlfriend, but she insisted that we were just friends.
Where were you living when you lived with Natalie Parker?
I believe it was 9th Street, 9th in Nebraska.
Was that an apartment or what kind of residence was that?
It was apartment.
And so was it just you and Natalie that lived in that apartment on 9th Street?
Yes.
How is it that you came to meet Natalie?
She, when I lived on 19th and Pierce, that's where I first met her at. I think she was coming to visit her brother at the time. And that's when we met.
And who was her brother?
Nathan.
What's Nathan's last name?
I believe Parker.
Did you end up meeting Nathan Parker through Natalie?
Yeah.
How did you refer to Nathan? What did you call him by name? What was the name that you referred to him as? Did you call him Nathan or did you call him something else when you would see him?
I always call him Nate.
You call him Nate? Do you remember what time you would have first met Nate Nathaniel Parker?
I'll say maybe sometime in November, December, something like that, of 22.
November, December of 2022?
Yeah.
Now, the person that you refer to as Nathan or Nate Parker, did he have a son?
Yeah.
Did you know who this person was?
Yeah. Well, I met his son through his auntie.
Do you remember when that was?
Well, I believe she brought him to my apartment one time.
And when you say you met him through his auntie, are you referring to Natalie Parker?
Yes.
And what's his name?
Well, she always used to call him Little Nate.
Is that what you refer to him as then too?
Yeah, I refer to him as that.
And so as you understand it, Mr. Lee, Nathan Parker, or Nate Parker, as you refer to him as, and little Nate are father and son, is that right?
Yes,
And Natalie Parker is Nate's sister and little Nate's aunt.
yes,
And little Nate that you're referring to, is that the defendant, Nathaniel Parker the third?
yes.
How would you characterize your relationship then with Nate?
The father? The father of the son?
Well, your relationship with him, how would you characterize your relationship with Nate? Describe that for the jury.
Well, we were cool.
Were you friends of his?
Well, I wouldn't say friends, but he would come to his sister's house and we never had a misunderstanding.
And how would you describe your relationship with the defendant, little Nate?
Well, I guess we were cool. We never had a misunderstanding.
Would you spend more time with Nate or little Nate, the defendant?
His father.
Since we're talking about two people with the same name, Nathaniel Parker, I just want to make sure that we're talking about, so to avoid any confusion, how we're going to refer to them as, okay, Mr. Lee? So when we talk about the defendant's dad, you're going to refer to him as Nate. Is that how you're going to refer to him?
Yes,
Okay. And if you refer to the defendant, are you going to refer to him as little Nate?
yes.
Okay. And do you see little Nate here in the courtroom this morning?
Um, yeah,
Did you know where Nate lived back in February of 2023?
yes,
Had you ever been over to his apartment?
yes.
When was the first time you were over at his apartment for any reason?
I believe it was in either early February or late January. He had asked me to take my truck to get some things, pick up some things. Me and his sister pick up some things for him and bring it to his apartment.
Do you know what street that he lived on?
I'm not sure. I think it's right off Pierce, 11th and Pierce or something like that.
If I told you 414 11th Street, does that sound right?
Yeah,
And so as I understand it, Mr. Lee, the first time that you were over at his apartment, you were taking some things over for him
yeah,
using your truck?
yeah.
Did you go inside his apartment on that time?
No,
The night that we're going to talk about specifically here this morning, Mr. Lee, is the night of February 24th of 2023. Do you remember that particular night?
yeah,
Do you remember that day?
yeah.
Did you have occasion to be over at Nate's apartment at 414 11th Street on that particular day?
I went over there that evening.
Do you remember about what time it is that you went over there that evening?
It was dark outside, so I'm figuring maybe it was about 8 or 9 o'clock.
Did you go over there by yourself that particular evening?
Yes.
Do you remember what you had been doing that day before you went over to Nate's apartment that night?
Well, I was just hanging out at the house.
And when you say you were hanging out at your house, do you mean the apartment over on 9th Street?
Right,
And was Natalie there at the apartment with you that day?
yes.
When you were at your apartment over on 9th Street that day before heading over to Nate's apartment, did anyone come over to your apartment that particular day?
Yeah,
Who came over to your apartment on that particular day?
Nate and little Nate.
Do you remember what time they came over to your apartment on that day?
I'm not sure, but I think it was early in the evening.
Was it still light outside when they came over?
Yes,
Were you expecting them to come over that particular day? Or did you know that they were headed over to your apartment?
I always expected for them to come over.
You always expected them to come over?
Yeah.
But did you know that they were specifically coming over that day?
No, I didn't know that.
Did they both come over together, Nate and little Nate?
I don't remember.
Was Natalie there when they came over?
Yes,
What happened, if anything, when they came over to your apartment?
well, we usually drink a few beers. Mostly just socializing.
Did you talk with little Nate at all, the defendant, when he came over to your apartment that day?
I might have said what's up or something like that, but I don't usually talk with him.
Did you talk with Nate when he came over?
Yeah,
When little Nate or the defendant was over at your apartment on that particular day, did he have any knives with him when he came over to your apartment?
yeah.
How many knives did he have with him when he came over to your apartment on that day?
I'm not sure, but maybe 2 or 3.
Was he doing anything with the knives when he was over at your apartment?
He was just showing them off.
Do you recall anything about the knives in particular that he was showing you?
Well, I know he had like a large silver knife. I didn't know what type of knife it was, but I think he told me that it was a bayonet or something type knife.
And what kind of blade did that knife have on it?
It had like a silver blade.
Was it long or short, in your opinion?
It was long.
What was he saying about that particular knife, if anything?
Well, I was like, well, it looks like an antique or something. So that's basically what I was like, man, it's pretty old, like. So basically, we were just talking about, admiring the knife and stuff.
Did you handle the knife at all?
I don't remember.
Do you remember any of the other knives that he had with him when he was over at your apartment on that day?
I think he had like a butterfly type knife. It was kind of big too.
Any of the other knives that you recall that particular day when he was over at your house or apartment?
Yeah, and before he left, he gave me a knife.
Can you describe the knife that he gave you before he left?
It was it looks like it was a pretty old looking knife. It was like a gold switchblade.
Why did he end up giving you that knife?
He just said that he had liked it me and here go a gift, OG.
How long do you think you spent talking with the defendant about knives and him showing you different knives when he was over at your apartment that day?
Well, I didn't really hold no conversation about the knives. It's just I admired them, and then I usually just have a seat and just, just listen to people and talk.
So the little Nate or the defendant was doing a lot more of the talking than you were.
Yeah,
Did you have any conversation with Nate when he was over at the apartment?
not really, except for joking. We joke around a lot, so
How long do you think the both of them were there at your apartment that day?
mm, maybe a couple of hours.
Did they leave together from your apartment when they left after a couple hours?
I'm not sure.
Did you leave with them when they left your apartment?
No,
When they left, was it still light outside?
yes,
But you don't know what time it was when they left that day?
no, I don't.
And as I understand it, Mr. Lee, the defendant gave you a knife before he left, that being the knife that you described with the kind of the gold handle with the switchblade.
Yeah,
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Mr. Lee, I'm handing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 27. Do you recognize State's Exhibit number 27?
yep.
And what do you recognize that exhibit to be?
It's the knife he gave me.
State law for State's Exhibit number 27.
Any objection to 27's admission?
No, Your Honor.
27 is admitted.
Now, would you be able to switch over to the Elmo?
Yes.
Gonna be a little bit of a glare there, Mr. Lee. Just want you and the jurors to be able to see that. So this is State's Exhibit number 27. And this is the knife that the defendant gave you that day when he was over at the apartment.
Yes,
Where did you put that knife after he gave it to you?
I just put it in my pocket.
You had it on your person?
Yeah, I just had it on.
Did you leave it on your person the rest of the day?
Yeah, it was in my pocket. I had forgot that I even put it in my pocket.
I'm sorry, say that again, Mr. Lee.
I had forgot that I even put it in my pocket.
You remember which pocket you would have put it in or where you put it?
It's probably my left pocket because I'm left-handed.
Pants pocket or a coat pocket?
Pants pocket.
What did you do after the defendant, little Nate, and Nate left your apartment that day? You said you didn't go with them. What did you stay at your apartment?
Yeah,
Did Natalie stay at the apartment too?
yeah,
Now, at some point later that day on February 24th, did you leave your apartment?
yeah, I left that night.
And where were you going when you left that night?
Well, I told Natalie that I was gonna go by her brother's house.
You were gonna go to Nate's apartment?
Yeah.
And I think you said earlier that it was dark outside when you headed that way.
Yep,
Were you walking?
yep,
Were you by yourself when you
Ye-
walked over there?
yep.
Did you let Nate know that you were coming over to his apartment, or did you just start heading that way?
I don't know if I let him know. I think I just went over there.
Now, to going over to Nate's apartment on that evening of February 24th, had you been drinking at all that day?
Yeah, early that day.
Do you remember what you were drinking that day?
Well, I think I had bought some Orange Jubilee.
What's Orange Jubilee?
That's some wine.
Did you have anything else to drink before you headed over to Nate's apartment?
Maybe a couple of cans of beer.
Do you know approximately over what period of time you would have drank the Orange Jubilee and the couple cans of beer?
That was earlier that day.
Can you approximate over what span of time that you would have drank that alcohol?
I think maybe about 1 o'clock to maybe about 1 o'clock to about 3 or 4 o'clock.
So from 1 to 3 or 4 o'clock PM, you would have drank that alcohol?
Yeah.
Did you have anything to drink when the defendant and Nate were over at your apartment?
Maybe I did, maybe a beer or so.
How much of the Orange Jubilee did you drink? Let me ask this, Mr. Lee, does it come in a bottle, or I'm unfamiliar?
Yeah,
with
it was
that.
in a bottle.
And so how big a bottle that are you talking about?
A liter size bottle.
Do you know approximately how much of that you would have drank that particular day then before you headed over to the defendant's apartment?
Yeah, maybe about a cup full.
Did the defendant or Nate have anything to drink while they were at your apartment?
Probably so.
You don't recall specifically though if they did or didn't?
I only know that we have beer and stuff there most of the time. So if they come in, they'll drink a beer. So.
Was Nate over at his apartment when you got over there?
Yes.
How long of a walk is it for you to go from your apartment on 9th Street to his apartment over on 11th Street?
Maybe 3 minutes, 4 minutes.
So it's a short walk for you.
Yes.
So tell me what happens when you're walking to Nate's apartment. What happens when you get to Nate's apartment?
Well, I knock on the door and he asks who it is. I tell him and he let me in.
Was there anyone else at Nate's apartment when you got there that night?
Yeah, it was little Nate, and there was another guy there. I believe he's a Native American, and
Did you
and
know?
Big Nate and me.
Okay. So then when you got there, there was yourself there, the defendant, little Nate,
Mhm.
Nate, and another Native American.
Yep.
But you didn't know who that was. You don't know his name.
No, I don't know his name.
What was going on, or what were they doing when you got there?
Well, he was showing off the knives he had.
What, if anything else, were they doing?
Well, he was drinking beer, I guess.
So So what happened after you got there, Mr. Lee? So you get there, there's this group of people in the apartment. What takes place next?
We were talking and I think that we decided to go get some beer.
And when you say we decided to go get some beer, who's we?
Me and Nate.
Was it just you and Nate that left to go get the beer?
No.
So who all left to go get the beer?
Well, he had I think he had called another guy. He came and picked us up in his car.
And so who was the other guy that he had called to come pick you up in the car?
Well, I think they call him Conrad.
Did you know who this person was?
I didn't really know him, but I met him through Nate.
How long had you been there before the decision was made to go get some beer?
Maybe about 20 minutes, something like that, 20, 30 minutes.
And so this person that shows up to pick you up, how long did it take for him to get there?
Just a few minutes, maybe about 10 minutes, then he showed up.
And where did he pull up when he came to pick you guys up?
I think he pulled up like through in the alleyway, like, and we all walked out and got in his car.
And when you say that we all walked in to get in his car, who's the group of people that are going to get in the car?
It was Big Nate, Little Nate, and me.
What about the other Native American that was in the apartment when you first got there? Where was he?
Oh, he had left.
When did he leave?
I think he had left right before we even went to the stores.
So he was there for just a little while longer while you were there before he left?
Yeah, well, he was there before I came, so, and before we left to the store, he had left the apartment.
So as I understand it, Mr. Lee, then the people that are leaving the apartment to go get the beer are you, Nate, and little Nate, the defendant. Is that right?
And Conrad.
Okay. You mean Conway?
Conway? Yeah, Conway. So,
And do you remember the kind of vehicle that he picked you up in that night?
I know it's a small car.
This photograph has been marked as State's Exhibit number 71. You recognize that vehicle as State's Exhibit 71?
Yes,
And what is it?
it's a car.
How do you recognize that car?
That's the car that Conway was driving.
So that's the car that everyone loaded up into?
Yes.
State would offer State's Exhibit number 71 into evidence.
Any objection to 71?
No, Your Honor.
71 is admitted.
So that's the vehicle that came to pick you guys up. So as I understand it, Mr. Lee, there's 4 of you in that vehicle at that time when you get in. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so who's driving the car?
Conway,
And who's seated in the front passenger seat of the car?
Big Nate,
Who is seated in the rear driver's side of the car?
Little Nate,
And who's seated in the rear passenger side of the car?
me.
And so where are the 4 of you headed as you leave Nate's apartment to go get beer? Where are you going?
We were going to Select Mart.
The Select Mart at 14th and Jackson?
Yes,
Did you go straight from the apartment to the Select Mart?
yes.
Is it a short drive between those two locations?
Yes.
Is there any sort of conversation or anything that's taking place in the short drive between Nate's apartment and the Select Mart?
No, but I think Conrad asked B for some gas money.
He asked you for some gas money?
Yeah,
Did you have any gas money?
I think I had about $5.
And so what happens once Conway pulls into the Select Mart? What takes place then?
I think I went in to pay for the gas, and I think Nate went in.
Who went in to pay for the gas?
I think I went in to pay for the gas.
So you went in to prepay for some gas
Right.
because Conway had asked you for some gas money?
Yeah.
Did Conway get out to pump the gas? Do you recall?
I think he did.
Did anyone else get out of the vehicle at that time other than you and Conway to pump the gas?
I think Big Nate got out the car and me.
What was Nate doing when he got out of the car?
I know I went into the store, and after that, I didn't see him until I came back out.
How long approximately do you think that you were in the store? Were you just prepaying gas?
I think so.
And so what happens when you come back outside the Select Mart?
When I came outside, by the time I was about to get in the car, I think Big Nate was like he was like Jeff, this is my friend, and I think he's messed up. I'm gonna take him to my apartment and let him sober up.
Did you recognize who this person was, his friend?
I think he was Willie.
Had you seen him before?
Yes,
Did you see him that night when you got to the Select Mart, went inside?
I didn't really recognize him standing out, but I know he used to stand out in front of the store.
So the first time you remember seeing him that night was when Nate told you, hey, he's gonna come back to the apartment with us?
Yeah.
Was there how did he appear when you saw him at the Select Mart?
Well, he walked over to the car, and I just moved to the side and let him sit in the middle.
So he got in the rear of the car?
Yeah.
And so is everyone still seated in the same positions that they were when they left Nate's apartment?
Yeah.
So Conway's driving, Nate's in the front driver's seat.
Mm-hmm.
The defendant, little Nate, is in the rear driver's side.
Yes.
And is Willie in the middle?
Yeah.
And you're on the rear passenger?
Yeah.
Did you have any conversation with Willie?
I only spoke to him. What's up, man? That's about it.
Did he respond?
Yeah.
Did he have any problem walking from the Select Mart to the car?
I didn't notice it.
Did he have any problem getting into the car and sliding over to the middle seat?
Nope.
And so all five of you are piled in the car at this particular point in time?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the plan after everyone gets back in the car?
Well, I wanted to I asked Conrad to take me over to the next block so I can get me some drug.
And what kind of drugs were you going to go get? Mr. Lee?
Some ice,
Is that methamphetamine?
I think so.
Where is this particular place in relation to the Select Mart? How far away is it?
Just over on the next block.
Is it a short drive away?
Yeah.
Was there any conversation going on in the car as Conway's driving you up to this particular location?
Not that I remember.
Did you have any more conversation with Willie in the car other than greeting him and asking him how he was doing?
No,
Was there any altercation or anything that happened in the car during the drive from the Select Mart up to this house?
no.
What happened once you got to this particular residence to get your meth?
Well, I went inside, I knocked on the door and I went inside,
This particular residence, did you go inside through the front door or the rear door?
the back door.
Did everyone else stay in the car?
Yes,
Mr. Lee, I'm going to show you a photograph, States Exhibit 85. You recognize States Exhibit number 85?
yes.
Okay, what is shown here in this photograph?
That's the house.
So that's the house that you went to after leaving the Select Mart?
Yeah.
States Exhibit number 85, the house that you're referring to, Mr. Lee, is it the White House depicted here?
Yes,
And the door that you would have gone up to, is that the rear door that we see shown here? The storm door is swung open.
yes.
Did you go inside that house by yourself then?
Yes.
And so what happened when you were inside the house?
Well, I tried to score some drugs.
How long do you think that you were inside the house?
Well, at the time, I don't think nobody had any, so I kind of asked around because it used to be a lot of people in there. And I think maybe about 5 minutes or more.
Did you end up buying any meth while you were inside the house?
Yeah,
Did anyone come into the house from the car while you were inside?
no,
Did you see anyone get out of the car before you got back to the car and to get in?
well, on my way out, the house, Big Nate had been knocking on the door, so when they opened the door, he was there, but I told him I'm coming out right now.
What did he want?
I guess he was trying to tell me to come on.
He was trying to tell you to come on.
Yeah,
Did you get back in the car then?
yeah,
Did Nate get back in the car?
yeah,
Both in the same seats you were before?
yep.
What, if anything, did you notice differently when you got back in the car after buying the meth?
It looked like Willie passed out.
When you say it looked like he had passed out, what do you mean by that? Describe that for the jury.
He was just laying in the seat with his head laid back. He was in the seat with his head laid back.
Were his eyes closed?
I didn't really look him in the face, but I know he was laid back. I thought maybe he had passed out drunk.
But it was different than when your observation of him when you got back in the car was different than when you had gotten out of the car. Is that right?
Yeah,
Did Willie say anything when you got back in the car?
no,
Did you say anything to him?
no,
Did anyone else in the car say anything when you got back in?
no.
What was the plan then once everyone was back in the car?
We was to head back to Nate's house.
So everyone headed back to Nate's apartment. Did you go straight from the house that you were buying the meth from straight back to Nate's apartment?
Yep,
Do you recall any conversation during that drive?
no,
Did Willie move or say anything during the drive from the one house to Nate's apartment?
no.
Where did you park when you got back to Nate's apartment, if you remember?
In the back.
Now, when you say in the back, are you referring to a specific area? Is it directly behind Nate's apartment?
Yeah, back of the building.
Is there an alleyway that runs back through
Yeah,
his apartment?
yeah.
And so what happens when Conway parks the vehicle back in the backside of Nate's apartment?
We park and I was like, let's help my guy in the inside the apartment. Cause I
What guy
thought
are you talking about?
Willie, cause I thought maybe he was drunk and he passed out. So I was like, let's help him. Let's get him in. Let's get him and let's take him in the apartment so he can get some rest.
Were you trying to get him awake?
I thought he wouldn't wake up. So I was like, man, he out cold.
Was his head still leaning back?
Yeah, but like I said, I thought he had passed out drunk. So
Did you try to get him out of the car?
yeah.
Were you able to do that?
Well, I was trying to get him out there, but Lil Nate, he kind of like shoved me out the way. It's like I got him, and he's a big guy, so he grabbed him, picked him up.
And what did he do with him after he picked him up?
He threw him to the ground.
What was the defendant's demeanor like when he pushed you to the side?
Seemed like he was mad about something.
How did he push you to the side?
He's like, "Get out the way," and he grabbed the guy.
And how was he carrying him?
He just like you pick somebody up like that. He was carrying him like this in his arm.
And then what did he do with Willie once he picked him up?
He walked toward the end of the car and he just threw him to the ground.
How did he throw him to the ground?
Just threw him to the ground.
How did you take that when he threw him to the ground?
I got mad at him. I was like, man, what you do that for? We supposed to be helping him.
What was the last thing?
I was like, well, what did you do that for? We supposed to be helping him.
When Willie hit the ground, did he respond or move at all?
No,
He was just lying there?
yeah.
What was the defendant's response when you were asking him why he did that?
He was just angry.
Do you know why he was angry?
I didn't know why.
So does anyone say anything or do anything when he's lying on the ground?
I think we were kind of fussing at each other, and then Big Nate was like, I was like, no, let's take him in the house. And Big Nate was like, yeah, y'all just grab him and take him. Y'all stop arguing. Yeah, grab him and take him in the house. That's what we did.
Did you help take Willie into the apartment?
Yeah.
Who else helped take Willie into the apartment?
Me and Lil Nate did it.
What was Nate doing?
I don't know if he was, behind us or in front of us, but I believe he just went to the apartment, and let us in, so.
So Nate wasn't helping to carry Willie into the apartment?
No,
Was Willie essentially lifeless as you were carrying him in?
like I said, I thought he had passed out, so he just,
But he wasn't able to help himself.
he didn't say anything and nothing, so he wasn't able to do nothing.
So what happened once you get him inside the apartment?
We get him in and then right at the front door, we just lay him down right there.
So when you get inside the apartment, you lay him inside, right inside the front door?
Yep,
Is this the first time that you had been inside Nate's apartment that day?
oh, I was there earlier, 4 weeks.
But that particular day, that was the first time that you had ever been inside his apartment. Do I understand that right?
No, I mean, before we went to the store, I was at his apartment.
Right, but February 24th would have been the first day that you actually went into his
Yeah,
apartment.
yeah,
Okay. This apartment, Nate's apartment, is it a big apartment or a small apartment?
it's small.
How many rooms are in this apartment?
I think it's just efficiency.
Is there a bathroom?
Yeah.
Is there a kitchen
A little kitchen, yep,
and then a larger room?
yep.
And the hallway that you lay him down in, you said it's right in front of the door?
Yeah, just right in front of the door.
What happens after you lay Willie down on the floor?
Well, I was like, man, I thought he was just messed up real bad, but then I was like, let's try to wake him up.
So what did you do?
I just kind of, shook him a little bit and then,
Was there any response to you shaking him a little bit?
no, there was no response. So, I think Big Nate opened his shirt up and it looked like he was stabbed.
Could you tell if he was breathing at all?
Yeah, well, I put my finger by his nose and that's when I was like, man, he's not even breathing.
When did you do that?
That was after I seen that he was stabbed.
So after his shirt was opened up and you saw that he was stabbed?
Yeah.
Where did you see where he had been stabbed?
It looked like he was stabbed like up on his neck somewhere.
What happened after that?
I said, we need to call the police.
So who all was in the apartment then when the police were called?
It was just me, Little Nate and Big Nate.
Do you know where the defendant, Little Nate, had gone once he was inside the apartment? Or were you paying attention to that?
I wasn't paying attention to him.
So you're not sure where he was?
Right.
Did you know where Conway had went after he parked the car and everyone got out?
I think Conway left.
You don't recall seeing him after that?
I don't recall.
Were you there when the police arrived?
Yeah.
And Nate was still there when the police arrived?
Yeah.
And the defendant, he was still there when the police arrived, as far as you know?
Yeah.
Did Willie move at all from the time that you laid him down on the floor until when paramedics and the police arrived at the apartment?
No.
Now, when you got over to Nate's apartment earlier that night, did you have anything to drink when you got over there before leaving to go to the Select Mart?
I don't think so.
Did you have anything to drink when you got back to the apartment?
Well, before, I had drank the beer before, I left the drug spot. One of the guys in the drug spot gave me a beer.
Do you believe that you were intoxicated that night, Jeffrey, Mr. Lee?
Yeah,
Did you see anybody with any knives while you were in the car?
no,
Did you see any knife once you got back to the apartment?
no,
Did you see anything that night that led you to help understand why the defendant was angry?
no. I didn't understand why he was mad.
It was just clear to you that he was mad or angry.
Yeah,
Mr. Lee, everything that you're testifying to here this morning that took place on February 24th of 2023, did that take place here in Sioux City, Woodbury County, Iowa?
yes.
State has no further questions for Mr. Lee at this time.
Mr. Loomis, did you wish to offer exhibit 85? You hadn't offered it yet. I didn't know.
I do, Your Honor.
Okay, any objection to 85?
No, Your Honor.
85 is admitted. All right, so we're going to take our morning break now. Keep in mind that admonition I gave you yesterday, and we'll take a short break. And then we'll be back at with cross-examination. All rise. We're going to come around. I'm going to help you through there. Great. I think we'll let the witness go out. He's going out the hallway. It's fine, but I think that's what we're waiting for. So thank you. We'll take about 10.
Chance. Yeah.
Do you need more water in there before lunch? Oh, okay.
Wow, oh, good. I'm like, oh, yeah, well, you tend to talk. He handed it. It's like for finish.
Thanks, Woody. However you need to do it, just keep me posted. Test.
And I'm gonna give you the freedom set, that strikes through, the structure, you strike, you think that this stage of my life, I could say things correctly. I struck through that initial, the one sentence that I told you to disregard, so I give that to you.
And. And she hadn't included the immigration part of it, and so that part of the part. You can include it by, you think she. That's fine, I just need to.
Yeah, sure, gotcha, no problem, so.
That's okay. You can use it. And then the restroom. And then I'll be.
Things like that. Oh. You're such an electric personality, that's what's, yeah, yeah. Apparently it's you. All right. So, James, do you know where Mr. Lee went?
Yes, I found them.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's fine. Sure. I just gonna say, if you want to get him back in, we'll get him in the seat and then we'll bring everybody. in. Yeah, I figured as much. Yeah, that's okay.
Didn't know where he was gone, I just didn't see him anywhere.
Oh, yeah, okay, sure.
Just to be safe.
Must have had to really go, so. Because you opened the door and he walked out and I thought, okay, a lot of times they just stand there trying to figure out what they're supposed to do and he didn't have much hesitation. So I thought, well, he had somewhere to be. No, Cheryl. You can. And now. Well, and I know I've been responding to, you asked me in an email about this case. Therese asked, well, we're to schedule something on the 13th of November, and I'm thinking, just pick a time. I have no idea, so. I assumed it was, I wasn't gonna restart it, but I didn't. Okay, okay, yeah, and that's what I thought was happening. Just thought it'd be easier than me trying to remember to restart it every time.
Okay.
Just when the jurors come in, we just need to stand up when the jurors come back in through, okay? So you can keep your chair pushed down a little bit so you can stand up and come back in. And then just pull it in when you get it.
All right.
Yeah, I just can't, but it can't help but it's been there forever and I keep looking up and it's wrong and I have to keep looking over here then to double check because I don't have my,
27, you have 27. 3185.
yeah, I think there's just three. Yeah, yes, we are. We do have an assistive device over at the court administration. And I don't know if but we could certainly ask. I'm pretty sure they can get us something. The same thing that Bill Deck used the other day. Yeah, they might be. Let's ask Jill just a second. We'll see if we can get that figured out. For a family member. Everyone may be seated. Jill? Do we have access to the assistive device?
Yes.
Okay, we have somebody. Okay. Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, I think we're ready for cross-examination now.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay,
Mr. Lee, good morning.
Good morning.
I'll just jump right into it. You had been drinking most of that day, correct?
Yeah, I had something to drink that day.
Okay. Did you start drinking before the two Nates came over to your place?
Maybe.
Okay. And while they were over there, you guys had a few?
Yeah, most of the time.
Okay. And then you went over to their place and had some more and you were pretty intoxicated that day.
I wasn't staggering or nothing like that though.
Okay. Did you have anything else prior to going to pick up the ice that you were trying to get? Did you have any other weed, any other meth, anything like that?
I don't think so.
Okay. Did you talk about any big events in little Nate's life at all?
I don't remember.
Okay, but that's fine. Little Nate did give you a knife that day, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And did he give you the knife because he was celebrating anything? Do you remember?
No, he just said that he thought I was cool and he gave me a gift. He said, OG, here go a gift.
Okay. And you're one of the 4 and later 5 people who was in the car that night.
Yeah.
And you said it was a small car when you first saw it?
Yeah, it looked like a small car.
Okay, was it any bigger on the inside, or was it just as small on the inside?
It's smaller than my truck.
So, can you repeat that?
I say it just looks smaller than my truck.
Okay. So there wasn't a lot of room to move around?
No, it wasn't a lot of room there.
Okay. And with Willie in the back, there was even less room.
Yeah, I suppose so.
You guys were pretty cramped in the back?
Well, we wasn't like touching each other or anything. It didn't seem like it was, 3 people could sit in the back, you know, pretty
But-
much it was room.
Okay. And you were all wearing winter coats that day?
Yeah, I was wearing a coat.
Okay. So quite a bit of clothing on everybody in the back seat.
Yeah, it was wintertime.
When you returned to the car after you picked up whatever you're picking up at that house, you did not think that Willie was hurt.
Like I said, he had supposedly been real intoxicated when Big Day told me that we were gonna take him to the house and let him sleep it off.
So the reason why you guys picked him up was because he was really drunk, it was cold, and you were gonna let him sleep it off.
That's what Big Nate said.
Okay. Did you see any blood before you took Mr. Harlan into the house or into the apartment?
No,
How were you feeling in the apartment after you found out he was stabbed?
uh, I don't know. I just know that he was hurt and that we needed to call the ambulance police.
And were you upset based on what you had seen or what was going on?
Yeah, I was upset. I was already kind of upset before we even got in the house, but I was more or less shocked that he was hurt. I didn't think that he was hurt. I thought that he had been drinking too much.
Do you remember if you had anything to drink on your second trip to Nate's apartment?
I mean, I think I had a beer.
Okay.
I mean, they gave me a beer at the spot.
Okay.
The guy was like, hey, just gave me a beer. I
Okay.
think I drank it. I don't know if I drank it at the house or before I got in the house. I just don't remember.
Mr. Lee, I don't want to dive too deep, but you've got a little bit of a criminal history.
Objection, may we approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Folks, we've got to make a little bit of a record on a legal matter, so just hang tight. Feel free to stand and stretch if you like. We're going to go back to chambers. All right, you may be seated. Mr. Mulford, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Lee, you were convicted of identity theft in 2010.
Um, yeah, I think so.
And I believe I misspoke. I believe it was 2008. That occurred here in Woodbury County.
Yeah,
Mr. Lee, have you been charged for the drugs you bought that night?
Objection. Relevance.
Overall, you may answer the question. You know, also, I know you've already answered questions about this, but to the extent that you feel the need to do so, you may rely upon the Fifth Amendment for further questions.
I guess not.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Lee, were you upset because what you saw the defendant do to Willie?
Yes,
So when you testified that you were upset when you got into the apartment, it's because what you observed the defendant do to Willie and throwing him to the ground outside?
yes.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. The state has no further questions.
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. You are excused. Okay, you're free to go.
Thank you.
Now the state calls Officer Jay Hogendijk.
I'm gonna have you go ahead and have a seat, and then we'll have you adjust the microphone. Thank you for telling us. It's important that just holler at me if you need to, so. I'll have you go ahead and speak almost going to tell the truth and nothing but the truth in this matter.
Yes,
All right, I want you to go ahead and tell us.
it's Jay Hogendijk.
Thank you. Good morning, officer.
Morning,
Can you state your name for the jury?
Lieutenant Jay Hogendijk. I'm with the Sioux City Police Department,
And Lieutenant, how long have you been with the Sioux City Police Department?
30 years.
What's your current assignment with the Sioux City Police Department?
I'm the overnight watch commander
How long have you been in that assignment?
since April.
Of this year?
Yes,
Prior to that, what was your assignment with the Sioux City Police Department?
I was an afternoon watch supervisor.
So what does that mean? Can you describe for the jury what your duties and responsibilities would have been as an afternoon supervisor?
So as a sergeant, prior to becoming a lieutenant, I would supervise the officers, handling of calls, major crime scenes, staffing shortages, making sure that we had proper staffing on the street, dealing with calls from the citizens, and making sure the officers had all that they needed to do the job every day.
And are you a certified peace officer here in the state of Iowa?
Yes, I am.
What shift were you working back in February of 2023?
Afternoon shift,
And the afternoon shift covers what hours?
2:30 to 10:30 PM.
Were you working on February 24th of 2023?
Yes, I was.
The afternoon shift
Yes,
in your capacity as sergeant then?
yes.
While you were on duty on February 24th of 2023, were you called out or dispatched for a call at 414 11th Street here in Sioux City?
Yes, I was.
What was the nature of that call that you were out for?
It was reported as a stabbing.
Did you respond to that call?
Yes,
Did other officers respond?
multiple officers.
What, if any, information did you have upon responding to that call before arrival?
That there was an individual that had been stabbed. I believe some information was that there was 2 stab wounds and was at 414 11th Street. And also, I believe obtained information was apartment number 6 was the location of the victim.
So that was the information that you had going into that call?
Yes,
When you arrived at that particular location, what kind of building is it?
it's a multi-level apartment complex.
And this apartment that you were headed to, did you know what level on the building it was?
No,
This apartment that you were going to and arrived at, was it a secure apartment?
the front door is a secured glass door.
Were you first on scene?
I was second on scene.
Who arrived before you?
Officer Kim Steele.
Were the two of you together when you went up to the front door of that building?
Yes,
The front door faces what street?
11th Street and faces to the north.
Was there anyone at the front door when you got to the door?
No,
And then was it secured when you got there?
yes,
Secured meaning it was locked and you couldn't get in?
that's correct.
How long did it take for you to respond and arrive to that call?
I was at the police department at 6 and Douglas. So it was, I'm not sure, 30, 45 seconds to a minute at the most.
And as I understand it, the 911 call came in at 9:47 PM.
That's correct.
So what happened when you and Officer Steele come to the door? It's secured, no one's at the door. What do you do?
I started pounding on the glass.
And what happens then?
There was no one came to the door immediately, so I started to proceed to see if I could find a separate entrance or second entrance. And then someone came to the door and I went back to the door.
And who is it that came to the door?
Nathaniel Parker Jr.
How long had you been standing before he came to the door?
I would say approximately a minute to minute and a half.
Did he let you in?
Yes,
Did both you and Officer Steele then enter the apartment?
yes.
Can you walk the jury through kind of where you go once you come into the apartment in order to get to what you said was apartment number 6 where the call was coming from?
Yes. When you walk in the front door, there's a staircase that goes up to the upper floors and a staircase that goes down to the lowest floor, the bottom floor. And we went down the stairs to the bottom floor. When we reached the hallway, we made a right-hand turn, which led us to the apartment number 6 door, which would, when you made that right-hand turn, the door is on your left.
Was the door to apartment number 6 open or closed when you got there?
Closed.
So what did you do when you got to the door, apartment number 6?
Nathaniel Parker Jr. was leading the way, then Officer Steele, and then myself. He opened the door and stepped in, and Officer Steele stepped to the doorway behind him, myself following. And then I was looking into the apartment at that point, past them.
Did Nathaniel Parker Jr. enter the apartment
Yes,
after he unlocked the door?
yes.
And then both you and Officer Steele entered into the apartment?
I had not gotten into the apartment at that point because they were both in the way, in the doorway.
And so as you're looking into this apartment, kind of describe for the jury what it is that you see when the apartment door gets opened.
A short distance inside the door, I observed a male laying on his back, appeared to be unconscious. And I could also see another individual standing deeper into the apartment, even though this was a small apartment. And that's what I could see initially.
And so what did you do then upon making these initial observations?
I told Officer Steele and Nathaniel Parker to back out, or asking Officer Steele to help get Nathaniel Parker out of the entryway. As soon as he was brought back out of the apartment, I then entered the apartment to clear the apartment from any other individuals and any potential danger, as medical was coming and we needed to make the scene safe before they could enter the apartment to render aid to the individual laying on the ground.
And so how did you end up clearing the apartment?
I walked in, observed the male laying on the floor, stepped past him where another male was standing, and I was talking very loudly, telling him he needed to get out of the apartment. I needed to clear the apartment so medical could come in, and telling him to exit the apartment. He did not want to leave the apartment, so I grabbed a hold of his arm and pulled him and pushed him out the door to the other officer, Officer Steele, and other officers that were arriving, telling them to watch that individual and to keep him out of the apartment.
Did you make it clear that you were inside this apartment and you were trying to clear it out so that medical could come in? Is that what your objective
Yes,
was?
when I had pushed them out the door, I was basically in the doorway of the apartment, and both Nathaniel Parker Jr. and this other male, which is Jeffrey Lee, were standing there, and I had told him to sit down and get on the ground, trying to control them so we could get medical in as soon as possible.
And why is it that you're doing it all this way, Lieutenant? What's the reason for doing this the way that you're doing it?
Trying to get medical in as soon as possible.
And in order to do that, you need to secure both the persons that are in the apartment and the actual apartment itself. Is that fair?
Yes, because I don't know what is happening at this point, where any threat might be to any medical personnel, and therefore I need to make the scene safe for them to come in to provide treatment.
Did you see anyone else when you first stepped into the apartment other than the body that you saw on the ground, Mr. Lee, who was further into the apartment, and Nathaniel Parker Jr., who had stepped in? Was there anyone else that you initially saw inside the apartment?
No.
Now, you indicated it's a small apartment. Give the jury a sense of the size of this particular apartment that we're dealing with.
It's an efficiency apartment, which means when you walk in, there's a door on the right, which is a bathroom. There's just one room, which I would say maybe it's 12 by 14. There's a closet that you can walk into, and there's a small like galley type of kitchen. That is the full apartment.
And did you see anyone else, or did anyone else alert you that they were inside the apartment when you initially went in?
Not when I initially went in, no.
So after you get Mr. Lee out of the apartment, he's in the hallway outside the door, is that right?
Nathaniel Parker Jr. and Jeffrey Lee were both sitting on the floor, and I went back into the apartment.
And did Officer Steele remain outside in the hallway
Yes,
with those two individuals?
yes.
What if anything happened then when you went back inside the apartment?
I went in to do a secondary search to see if any more people were inside. As I'm looking around, I notice the bathroom door is partially open and I can see movement. And so when looking in the bathroom, which was dark with no light on, I could see another person in there. So I ordered that person to come out and grabbed a hold of the door and grabbed a hold of him as he started coming out, grabbing his arm and pushing him out the apartment also, and turning him over to other officers that were in the hallway.
This person that was in the bathroom, had they said anything to alert you that they were there?
No,
You indicated that the light was off.
yes.
And who was this individual that came from the bathroom?
Nathaniel Parker III.
Is that person here in the courtroom?
Yes,
morning?
he's sitting at the table.
The state asks that the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant. What did you do with him then what did you do with the defendant after he was removed from the bathroom?
I left him in the supervision of the other officers.
That would be outside in the hallway?
Yes,
Did you have to physically remove him as you did Mr. Lee?
I did grab a hold of him, pull him out the rest of the way of the bathroom, and pushed him to the entryway. I would say he walked the last couple steps through the doorway to where officers were waiting for him.
Did the defendant say anything as you were removing him from the apartment?
I do not recall him saying anything to me.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Lieutenant, I'm gonna hand you the photograph, the mark is 45, 46, and 47. Can you look at those photographs for me?
Yes,
Do you recognize what's depicted in those three photographs?
yes, I do. The first picture is looking from the hallway into the apartment. Then the next two pictures show the apartment's bathroom door in a almost closed state with a bottom hinge that's ripped off. And then the last picture shows the door kind of sitting sideways in the door frame, but you can see into the bathroom partially.
Are these fair and accurate photographs?
Yes,
Take it off for states 45, 46, and 47.
Any objection to either of those?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, 45, 46, 47 are each taken.
Lieutenant, I'm showing you states exhibit number 45. Can you see that either on the screen in front of you or on the big screen over here?
yes,
And I believe you indicated that in states exhibit 45, this vantage point that we're looking at is essentially from the hallway into apartment number 6.
correct.
And the doorway that we see, the white door that we see in this particular photograph, is that the bathroom door that you're referring to?
Yes, it is.
And the room that we step into coming into this apartment, that's essentially the efficiency room of the apartment that you're talking about?
Yes, it is.
Where is the kitchen then in respect to where the bathroom door and the living space of this apartment is?
You see that lamp sitting on the floor? Right before you get to the lamp is where you walk into the kitchen. The kitchen is to the right. So the lamp actually is sitting just past the entry into the kitchen.
Now, when the door swings open to this apartment, the bathroom door that we see in 45, how is that bathroom door positioned? Is it closed? Is it open?
It was partially open when I entered.
How far open was it?
I would say it was open probably a good foot wide when I entered.
So in states exhibit number 46, that's the bathroom door, right, Lieutenant?
That's correct.
And it's mostly shut there in this particular picture, is that right?
Yes,
So it was a little further open than what we see in states exhibit 46,
yes, it was wider than that when I entered the apartment.
but you were able to see that the lights were off in the bathroom.
Yes,
Then states exhibit number 47. You mentioned in your testimony earlier that the bottom hinge had been ripped off. How are you able to notice that when you're going into the apartment? When did that come to your attention that the bottom hinge had been ripped or broken off?
The victim was laying on the floor with his head right next to that hinge. And so when I looked and saw the victim, I also saw that door in that state.
So let's talk about who you saw on the floor when you get into the apartment. I'm gonna go back to State's Exhibit number 45, and I'm gonna hand you this exhibit in just a moment. What I would want you to do, Lieutenant, is to take exhibits 45 and kind of use that and show the jury, indicate on this picture to the jury, kind of the positioning of the body that you saw when you first get the door open and you make entry into the apartment.
So when I enter the apartment, looking in and stepping in by where the bottom of the bathroom door to the hinge is, where it was ripped off, right there was where the head of the victim was. His body laid diagonally across the floor. He was on his back, hands down by his side area. And as this wall juts a little bit further past where the door hinge area is, thus the reason why he was laying in that direction. So off on the left is the closet I mentioned, where that wall juts forward.
And using that same photograph, State's Exhibit 45, can you give some indication to the jury where Jeffrey Lee was within the apartment when the door gets open and you make entry?
He was standing right in front of that lamp, right by the entry to the kitchen.
And then how far did Nathaniel Parker Jr. step into the apartment using this photograph?
He had not passed the victim.
Did you render any assistance to the person that was on the floor of the apartment? Or was your objective to get the people out of the room and turn it over to paramedics?
It was to turn over to paramedics. I knew distance from the fire station to us. They would be arriving real quickly and would be wanting to get inside as soon as we made the scene safe. So my objective was to get the scene safe and then have them enter the apartment as soon as possible thereafter.
Were they waiting to make entry into the apartment once it was cleared?
I don't know where they per se were waiting, because as soon as I announced that the apartment was cleared, they were inside the door, I would say in 30 seconds. So they had to have been at the front door waiting for us to give them the go ahead to enter, because they were not far off.
There's State's Exhibit number 51. Recognize State's Exhibit number 51.
Yes, I do.
Hold on, Mr. Lieutenant. What do you recognize State's Exhibit number 51 to be?
That's inside of that bathroom in the apartment.
And is that a fair and accurate photograph of the bathroom?
From the hall, from the apartment looking in, yes.
They would offer State's Exhibit number 51 into evidence.
You object?
No objection.
51's in there.
State's Exhibit number 51. You indicated earlier, Lieutenant, that the apartment, small apartment. What about the bathroom? How large the size or how small is the bathroom?
It's very small, as you can see. You kind of can see past the bowl of the sink, right past it. You see that roll of toilet paper? That's where the toilet is. So you have the toilet, the stand-up shower, and then basically a standing space to the right. That's the full extent of the bathroom.
Where was the defendant when you realized somebody was in there, door gets open and you grab onto him to get him out of the apartment. Where was he?
Standing in front of the sink right at the door.
What's your next step then on scene? Once you've removed everyone from the apartment, the paramedics have entered into the apartment to begin treating the person that's on the floor. What do you do next?
I asked the paramedic basically for a status of what they were finding. And part of that is to try to make a determination whether the individual is alive or deceased at that point to determine what to occur next for the investigation side.
And so what did you end up doing?
I asked the paramedic and they advised that they were already starting to do chest compressions, advised they did not have a pulse, and they were checking the victim, and they brought in more equipment to bring the victim out of the apartment to the ambulance in order to continue providing life-saving measures and get him to the hospital.
Was this person removed from the apartment?
Yes.
So what's your next step then? You're on scene and you're the sergeant on scene.
Yeah.
Are you in charge of the scene at that point in time?
Yes, I am.
So what's your next decision that you have to make in terms of what needs to be done?
The next thing I did was make a phone call to Detective Sergeant Mike Manthorn. He's a sergeant over our Crimes Against Persons unit, and notify him and advise him that the status of the victim was not very good, did not look good at all, and seeking detective resources.
Did you at any point examine the person on the floor of the apartment at all?
From a standing position, just looking down, and when the paramedics were working on them, they did lift up his shirt, and I could observe stab wounds in his upper left chest shoulder area.
But that was the extent of your contact with him?
That was my extent.
So once you contact the detective bureau of the police department and advise them of what's going on, what is the next thing that you do on scene?
I checked in with officers to find where this may have occurred. There did not appear to be a at this point act of violence that happened right at this apartment. One of the things that caught my attention was where the victim was laying. There was not blood anywhere around there, and therefore we started trying to draw information from the officers who were talking to the three occupants of the apartment, Nathaniel Parker Jr. and Nathaniel Parker III and Jeffrey Lee, to see if we could find out where they came from, any vehicles involved, so we could try to determine where another crime scene may be located.
Part of your effort, would part of your effort be to look for video surveillance within the apartment?
Yes.
Was there any video surveillance within the apartment?
Yes, we were able to obtain a manager who was able to provide video surveillance, both inside and outside of the building.
Did you review that?
My review was over the shoulder of the manager as he was trying to play it on his cell phone.
And what are you trying to glean from the video surveillance that you're looking at?
We had been informed that there was a vehicle involved, and we were trying to determine the vehicle that was involved in bringing the victim to this address, because we would want to try to locate that vehicle and any other occupants that might be inside that may have either information or be involved in this incident.
Were you able to find something on that video that led you in a direction to locate this vehicle?
Yes.
Okay, what kind of description of the vehicle did you have? Or what information did you have about the vehicle after watching the video surveillance?
It was a smaller white crossover type of SUV vehicle.
Find, two questions, find the spot where you think it makes sense to take our look at this.
I have a few more questions and I think I'll be done, Your Honor. Thank you. This information that you obtained about this possible vehicle being involved, this white crossover, do you then take that information and relay it to other officers?
Yes.
And your effort is to attempt to locate this vehicle?
That's correct.
Does that information then go out to all the officers on that night?
It started out primarily to our detectives and the officers that were currently working. And then that information would then be passed on to the next shift that was coming in, which was the overnight shift that came in at 10:30 PM.
So what's the next step then after you look at the video surveillance? You make your observations and notations about the vehicle that possibly is involved. You relay that information out to your other officers. What is it that you do next?
Also asked for permission from Nathaniel Parker Jr. As he stated, this was his apartment. I asked for permission to have photographs taken of inside his apartment, and he consented. Then looking at the video with the apartment manager, we noticed that individuals that were involved came around from the back side of the building. So myself and Officer Adamy of the police department did go around to the back of the building to see if the vehicle was back there, to see if there was any evidence back there. So that would have been the next steps that we took.
What, if anything, did you note when you went around back?
In looking around, it was found that there was a pool of blood on the snow off the edge of the parking lot, and also a stocking cap next to it. Also, we found a couple other items laying in the middle of the area where you drive and park. Was a pink mitten. There was a pair of cowboy boots laying in the snow, and also did find a beer can that was laying in the alleyway. Did not know which of these other items that we found away from the blood would be possibly involved. So we identified those just the same, as we had not had a complete picture of what occurred in the back at that time.
What do you do with your scene after that point? So you're in the back, you notice what you notice.
Yeah.
What is it that you and the other officers do to secure this area?
I told Officer Adamy to hold the back scene until Identification Bureau could get there to photograph and collect evidence. And also Detective West of our Detective Bureau did come to the scene. And I also did explain and show him the back area.
Is the apartment itself secure until a search warrant can be obtained?
Yes, after we had spoke to the detectives, it determined for the 3 individuals to be taken to the station for interviews by the Detective Bureau. So the apartment was locked with Nathaniel Parker Jr.'s key and left locked at that time.
So the 3 individuals inside the apartment, the defendant, Nathaniel Parker Jr., and Jeffrey Lee were all transported to the station to be interviewed?
That's correct.
After the scene is secured, both the apartment itself and the back alleyway to that apartment, is there any other involvement that you have as it relating to this investigation?
So that apartment manager emailed to my work email video clips of both inside and outside the building. I then sent those video clips to our Identification Bureau so that they could retain them as evidence. And I also sent them to the detectives that were working the case.
For them to use for follow-up?
Correct.
Did you have any other follow-up after the initial on-scene investigation?
No, I did not.
Was it other officers that would have been involved in speaking with the individuals that were inside the apartment?
Yes, my conversations with them were very brief. It was mainly asking whose apartment and whether we could take photographs from Nathaniel Parker Jr. And I spoke very briefly to the defendant, advising him because of the seriousness of this incident that we need him to go to the station for interview to gather what we could from this. And that would have been, and Jeffrey Lee, I explained the same thing to him also.
And did you determine that this apartment was Nathaniel Parker Jr.'s apartment?
Just based on him telling me so.
And he's the one that provided you with the okay to initially take photographs of his apartment?
Yes, he did. And he was wearing a lanyard had the key to lock the apartment, and he provided that to me so I could lock it up before he left the building.
Did everything that you're testifying to here this morning, Lieutenant Hogendijk, take place here in Woodbury County, Iowa?
Yes, it did.
State has no further questions for this witness at this time.
Not limiting it all in the process. You, Mr. Lynn?
It will be, Your Honor. I think now might be a good time to
Okay, that's
take.
fine. Just appreciate the heads up. So we're gonna go ahead and take our lunch break now, and then we'll come back and finish with the examination. And so keep in mind, the admonition I previously given you, we'll see you back in an hour, so let's say 1:10, okay? Thanks, everyone. All rise and jury's excused. We'll see you back in an hour.